Running an African startup is very different to running a startup anywhere else in the world. There's the tech OGs, guys who've done it for a while. There's the new kids on the block. There's the VCs, impact investors, government stakeholders, and everybody else. It is a crazy show. And if you have been running a startup or know somebody who has, the one thing everybody has is war stories. My name is Tonee, and my African startup story is about those war stories. It's about trying to find the African inside the business, wherever the startup founder is from. It's about being able to stand up for what you believe in, to keep integrity at the forefront of what you're running, and try not to go crazy while you do it. So even as you listen, whether you're a startup founder or in any of these sectors I've mentioned, may you learn something, be inspired, maybe even start your own business. Welcome to my African startup story. Enjoy. Happy New Year to you. 2020 is here. I am wishing you all the luck in all your pursuits. I hope that everything you do, this podcast adds value. Anything you're listening to here is helping, and best of luck in everything you're doing. This year, we're going to have an interesting year. We've got a couple of interviews around the continent. So looking forward to being in North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. So that's going to be a fun time. But right now, let's get into it with Mikul Shah. He's the guy behind the Eat Out app, Nomad, and Yummy magazine. He's got quite a story to tell. No, but thank you for showing up.
No worries.
It's been years. Mikul Shah, or Mik. Welcome to the space.
Thank you.
This is my home.
Yeah, I can see.
Right, sure, you can see it. Right?
Yes.
My African startup story is a story of. It's the story people don't talk about when they talk about entrepreneurs. It's the vibe you don't know, the things that have happened that you don't hear about. And from like 2008 or something, you've been in this game. But who's Mikul? Who's Mik?
So I'm a Mombasa-born Kenyan of Indian heritage. Lived in the coast up until I was 18. Moved to the UK and had never any intention of coming back.
Really?
Yeah, never any intention of coming back.
Like when you were going, you knew you're not coming back.
Yeah, and I think I had a decent career in London after finishing university in Manchester.
What did you study?
Computer systems engineering.
That was like 1990, 2000?
Actually, yeah, 1999. I think I finished in 2000. But one thing that I realized while doing computer systems engineering is that I did not want to be a developer or coder. Yeah, like I knew that from my first class. My parents were paying so much money for my school fees. I was like, oh God, I have to go through this for 3 years just to get the degree. But I knew I just couldn't be.
You were never going to be.
I felt that I was very much a people person, and probably sales and marketing were more suitable for what I wanted to do, just being out in front of people rather than being behind a computer. So essentially, as soon as I finished university, I ended up working for a technology company, but in the sales sort of business development. And at that point, I moved to Nairobi for the first time for about 8 months, while I was waiting for my British work permit to come through. Moved back to London and then spent almost a decade in London. And then when my wife and I started our family, that's when we realized that, are we crazy? And why would we not go back home? And
10 years doing the same thing, or 10 years doing things in different parts? Like, what was your work?
No, I was pretty much, for a big chunk of time, it was actually just one position, one job. I moved through the company, and it was just one place for a really, really long time. What happened was we made a decision to move to Kenya in 2007. And that decision backfired on us after what happened in December 2007 in Kenya elections. Yeah, so essentially what happened was that we had decided, okay, in the summer, left our jobs, started thinking about what we're going to do. But the aim was by the end of the year, we were going to move to Kenya. Yeah. And then we realized when all of everything erupted that, hang on a second. And also we were very much westernized. Although we were Kenyans, like a lot of it was. Yeah, we've been there for so long. So it was just like, didn't feel comfortable with a young child to move to Kenya, especially what you were seeing in the news and so on. A year later after that, we were like, okay. And I think because our mindsets were like we were going to go to Kenya, that was always like, even though the elections happened, and then after that, like, we realized that actually, it was what it was, but life seemed to be continuing as normal. Now, the cool thing is, in that time, I ended up getting the entrepreneurial bug, because a couple of friends of mine, and I sort of credit a lot of what I've learned or what I've achieved to those early days working with these two boys, really good friends of mine, also Kenyan, also ended up in England. And
Nice.
what they were actually doing, which is a really incredible story, they started off thinking, oh, in our spare times, we will sell Kiondos from Kenya online in the UK, yeah? And we thought it was going to be a massive business. Obviously, nobody bought a Kiondo, but there were like some shops where they were going door to door, like some really small boutiques and whatever, going door to door, and they would get 5 Kiondos on consignment. So 2 weeks later, you'd go back and one had been sold, and so that's how they started. And strangely, that ended up with them having a connection with some bag manufacturers in Asia, in India. And that's when the whole plastic ban revolution happened in the UK. Wow. And literally, right place, right time. Today it's a multi-million-dollar business. They supply all over Europe, all over, even the US.
Kiondos.
Yeah, no, not Kiondos. Now it's jute bags and other products and eco-friendly other products. But the concept started with like a fashion product being sold through the web, and now it's like if from McDonald's to VW to the royal family to all sorts of institutions who want promotional giveaway bags. Obviously, bags were banned in supermarkets, so we had clients like Spar and Sainsbury's, but it was just being there at the right place at the right time.
Because everybody knows the big multi-billion-dollar story. They don't know that you had 5 Kiondos to take somewhere and only one was sold in.
Yeah, and luckily I was not involved in that process. I was involved in the process when they'd already moved to eco-friendly bags in the in the promotional gift item sort of range. And then the thing was like, we knew this ban or something would happen, and at the time my role was to just brand us to be perceived much bigger than we actually are. We were just 3 guys in a little room somewhere, but our online presence was very incredible, and everybody was like, and obviously we utilized the fact that our factories in India were certified to be ethical and organic and so on. So the picture painted online was incredible.
And so that was your first foot into the cold water of entrepreneurship. Yeah,
absolutely. And the thing is that I knew I was only going to be there for a very short amount of time. But
like what, a month, 2 months?
No, I was there from 2007, after elections happened, immediately when I went back, I didn't have a job. I had the option of going back to my old job, but I was like, you know what, I've made this decision. So, and these guys just said like, hey, why don't you come and help us for a little bit? And I said, looks interesting. So I think I did that for about 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
And I even did that when I moved to Kenya remotely, just working on certain projects for them. But then the time I moved back to to extend our family business and to actually build a factory and to run a factory in Athi River. And that was the intention, to move back to Kenya.
And that's so you're Kenyan Indian. That's a typical way that it happens in many Indian families.
Yeah.
Sons take over from their fathers, who took over from their grandfathers, who took over from grandfathers before that.
Yeah.
You didn't do that.
No.
Why?
Well, first of all, do you know how hard it is to get to Athi River every single day? That's like 3 hours of your life every day. If you multiply that by... Now I've been doing it for 10 years. That's a long time sitting in a car. Exactly, yeah. So I think it was a combination of things. The first thing was that, when I first came, it was really exciting. Lots of travel to India, to suppliers, and China to suppliers and factories, and just trying to understand, the business was pretty much non-fashion based. It was like, school shoes, gum boots, Askari boots, things like that, and my intention was, how do you make a brand out of this? How do you make it trendy? And, how do you get influencers? And this is the early days,
Gumboots, man.
Yeah. Exactly, before influencers. And I think the biggest challenge that I faced was typically what happens in Asian families. And obviously that's changing significantly. Either you take a career as a lawyer or a doctor and you build that path, or you join the family business. But typically what you did is you finish your university, 21 you're out, you do 2 to 3 years to gain some experience, and then you would come into the family business. So you're still fairly young coming into the family business. And let's say at 25 you're joining a family business, and that means that first of all, you're not in a position to sort of argue against the authority. Like you're just too young to say to your father or your uncle or whoever it is that actually I disagree with that. And I think for me, I came back when I was 29. And obviously, and I had a family, and obviously I was going to like call out things that I just disagreed with. And unfortunately, I disagreed with a whole lot of things.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, or just
fortunately, you have to understand that this business is 30 years old. They're definitely doing something right. They came from, their background was coming from absolutely nothing, and they've built massive businesses. So, I don't sort of think that they would, at the time I thought that they were doing things wrong, but you have to understand where they came from. And I was coming from a little bit of a privileged situation where this was going to be some sort of inheritance. And then for me, it was like, well, I can take the risk and go all out. And they were like, no, they deferred with those strategies. They weren't so risky and so on.
Of course.
So it's just different
they're
mindset.
They've been doing it for years. It's working for them. So why are you changing?
And they're worried about losing what they've earned over 30 years. And for me, I didn't earn any of that. I was ready to take a risk. And so I think like what happened was that my age and my experience was that I wouldn't just take orders or be told what to do without questioning it. And I think what was really great about the support from my family was that, when I said that maybe this is not a good idea and we shouldn't put so much investment behind doing this because I don't really want to do it. And truly, going to Arthur River was one of the reasons. But, it was just so many other reasons that I decided that. And the question was, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And but obviously technology and at the time when the undersea cable got connected, I just knew that so much opportunity was coming with fast and cheap internet. So I simply said, like, we will figure out what I will want to do. But we all agreed that, okay, this is not what we want to do.
Because you did do computer engineering, so it kind of makes sense that, CCOM and Teams being here and whatever else came. Did they push back against you doing something, or did they say, okay, we're going to support it, you need money for it? Like, did they invest in whatever you did? Or
no, so they didn't push back, and they were very, very supportive, but they simply said that we cannot put money behind something that we don't understand. For example, if I wanted to ask for a loan or some investment in, say, building a property, that was never a problem for them because they understood that they're not going to lose their money. They have some idea of ROI and they know that industry. But with tech, they just had no clue,
Like, what?
And so basically it was like, look, we will support you. You'll never really have to worry about a roof over your head or food on your plate. If it comes to that, you can come home for dinner. That wasn't a problem. But they're like, we can't put money into something that we don't understand. So you will have to figure out how either grow it organically or raise money, but that will be, your responsibility because we're giving you an opportunity that you're not willing to take up for whatever those reasons are. So they were very, very supportive, but unfortunately, as any wise investor, they were not doing it based on a relationship. They were simply saying that we don't understand this, so we're treating you like any other person who would come to us with this idea or, and we simply wouldn't invest because we don't understand it.
Which is a very strange thing for somebody to hear, considering that, the assumption a lot of people have is because you've come from a family that has got an industrial background, they've got quite a bit of money from the company they have, it's a natural thing for you to get money to start your own thing. Rich parents is the fastest way to get something going. But it's not necessarily true for everyone.
I don't know. I think that whenever especially when you're early raising money, what you have to understand is that when you're not yet there. Sorry. When you're starting out, first of all, raising money is expensive. Today $100,000 is not a lot of money for our business. When we first raised $100,000, we gave a huge chunk of our business away. But at that time, we felt like, it was like it was the end, like, yes, we've made it, at that
$1 billion.
yeah, at that time we realized that was the beginning. So I think the challenge always is that when you are receiving money, what are the conditions that come with it? And you can only imagine that raising money from family brings on a whole bunch of, especially invisible strings, and at some point there's gonna be this line which is "I told you so," and so I think it was like we all understood that. Look, it wasn't a fact. But this was something that they didn't understand, and I didn't want to be in a position to take money based on the relationship or the trust. They needed to be like investors, to believe in the business or in the concept or the idea, and if they believed in that, then if it failed and it went wrong, they would understand that it wasn't me, it was
you never took advantage of the relationship.
Yes,
it's the business that just didn't work.
Absolutely. So I think that was, and especially when it comes to family, it's because family are not going to then, or let's say if it's an investor, you could just say, well, it was an investor, But I think with family, like, it ends up to so many other complications when
10 years later they're like,
where you've lost somebody's money or, exactly. So I think that was always sort of conscious for us, for me, was that let's try to either go organic or take a bank loan or raise some investment. Luckily, the first thing that we did, we managed to raise a small amount of money.
So what was the first thing that came out?
So essentially, because the undersea cable had come in, we knew internet was going to become faster and cheaper, and therefore more people are going to use the internet to gain access to service.
This is like 2009-ish?
No, 2009, exactly.
Okay. All right.
And so, one of the things that I was doing as a hobby, even before I left the family business, was I was quite surprised that, there was no representation for restaurants on the web. And there, a single restaurant had a Facebook page, or there was a few that had websites. Nobody had Google Maps listings. And so for me, let's say in today's world, I would be called a food blogger because that's what I did. I went and I thought, like, how do people find out about restaurants? Because there's not a single restaurant is online.
Yeah.
So the first thing I simply did was I went and approached restaurants and I said, like, I'll give you your first digital presence. The only thing that I realized, because I'd used products like OpenTable, Top Table, rather than becoming a web developer and building their websites, I realized that at the same time, by giving them an online presence, I could build my own brand.
Yeah.
And so
you'd aggregate the information onto your own whatever.
Onto one platform, and till today, that's what Eat Out is. Yeah. The challenge was at the time that I also knew that it was just a matter of time that we could actually run with that model, because once everybody became more internet savvy and products like Facebook and Google, became more, there was more awareness, more easily accessible, but at the end of the day, they were completely free and they were used by millions and millions of people. We realized that we couldn't really charge somebody to have an online presence. So it did last, for a long, long time, but today, you're going to set up your Facebook page first before you even contact anybody else. It's and also, as a consumer of Facebook, you're spending so much time on Facebook and Instagram that you see yourself as your brand more there. So it just kind of makes sense that it's a free tool. You're already spending time on there.
There's a huge network of people using it.
Yes. Yeah. So I think when we started as a discovery platform, and I knew from the very early days that how we're going to beat Google from a discovery point of view, and there wasn't like, actually that wasn't the question. It wasn't we are not going to beat Google was the statement, So how are we going to continue this business, and what do we need to do in order to be there for a long period of time? And obviously from a tech point of view, we knew that we needed to get into a transactional model, either loyalty or reservations or food delivery or those kinds of things, because you're making money every time somebody's using your service. We also knew that was not something that was really easy to do. We also knew that the big guys Uber Eats and Jumia at the time, Hello Food were coming into the market. So, and there were so many other challenges around food delivery from addresses in Kenya. And no culture about food delivery. So we realized that food delivery was going to be a challenge, and also the big players had a lot of money. So we sort of built models around loyalty and payments, but at the same time, because we knew that was going to take a long time, we felt that we needed to build a brand.
And so now we've skipped a phase, because at this point you're starting up, like we're at scratch mode right now. We're looking at. So you're with your folks, you've just left, you decided I'm going to do this platform thing because you've taken some stuff from the UK that's working here.
Yeah.
Your first amount of money was how much? And where did you get a team from? And did you come up with this idea all by yourself? How did that whole...
Yeah, so the idea, like I said, none of our ideas, we're not that smart to invent, I think, especially at that time, we were simply looking at what's working anywhere else in the world and bringing it here, because we knew that at some point there'll be a community of users. The great thing about our business model at that time, remember, no restaurant had a digital presence, yet everybody knew that they needed a digital presence. So, it was just a matter of, it was literally a two-man team knocking on every single door, meeting owners. And it was not that difficult to convince that they already knew they needed a digital presence.
You guys solved the problem.
So we simply went to them and say, hey, by the way, you need a digital presence, and we will do that for you at a certain annual fee. So the day we launched the platform, we had 10 paying clients, and we were already, in a small level, we were making a profit.
Yeah.
We had no cost. We were two people, so I think that's how it all started. And then once you realize is that if you're selective on who your first customers are, the rest look at what those guys are doing, and then they just follow through. So suddenly, within a relatively short amount of time, we did have 100 paying sort of customers.
Wow, dude, man.
But yeah, like I said, it wasn't a big business. It was more of a hobby and so on. And that's when I met the investors, who was a Dutch VC fund. And again, at that point, it was like, look, we know we're going to die because you're paying $1,000 to have a website, but soon you'll just do your Facebook page for free, and then you will never want to pay $1,000 to build your website. So at that point, we sort of said we need some money to think about different models, and this investor was incredible, without really any business plan. Just said, like, you need seed money to develop some business plans, and he gave us some money, and that's how basically we raised our first round.
Did he give you like a long time, like 2 years worth of money, or did he give you like $5,000 for here, $500K?
So it was $100,000.
That's 10 million.
10 million.
In your mind, what was the longevity of that?
So within 12 months, we were supposed to provide two things. One is a long-term transactional business plan revenue model, but also in the short term, some sort of a route to market in terms of people understanding and realizing what we did and that we existed and so on. So,
and you don't have any MBA background, business background at this point. You're just, apart from the exposure you had with the two guys with the Kiondos, you have nothing?
No, I mean, so like I said, when I left university, it was a very technology-heavy degree. But then when I left, my role was purely business development. So I think that was my biggest plus point, was that I kind of sat on both sides of technology as well as business, sales, marketing. And
so you knew the tech and you knew the business.
Yeah, let's say I understood how tech worked. I understood tech architecture. I no longer was keeping up with the best practices in coding and development myself, but at least I could sit down with a developer and look at, how we're going to build a particular product and,
And did you understand the languages, COBOL, C++, Java?
I studied those, but today I have no clue.
No, but then, because now even guys are on GUIs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now you're in the business, you've gotten $100,000. Eat Out is a brand that's coming up. This is 2011?
11, yeah.
And so what next?
Obviously, the medium-term plan was to get into some sort of transactional revenue model, and we had already eliminated food delivery as one of those. So we chose loyalty and payments and reservations and things like that. Now, all of those required us to have exceptional relationships with some pretty difficult institutions if you're a small company. We're talking about payment companies from Visa to Safaricom. You're talking about banks. The whole aim was that you would either pay by it out or order through it out or book through it out, and we realized that just required patience and or raising a lot more money. And we decided that we would focus on building our brand by diversifying our portfolio with the overall aim of that if we are the authority when it comes to what's happening in food and drink in Kenya, then banks or other companies would want to actually work with us. So what we did is, rather than what you would typically do if you raise a lot of money, would be you would go marketing and you would spend your money to create brands. We did the opposite. We created brands that actually today now are generating the most revenue for our business. So and some of them went back in technology, and we decided to go into print. Even today people think, or I think, why are we in print? But the reality was that that's where spend was. There was a niche product. We flipped the model. Instead of doing free publications, instead of doing paid publications, we were doing free publications. But the aim was that we have a new product in the market that's generating revenue for us and profits for us, but at the end of the day, it's helping us build our brand, which in the long run allows us to build up stronger relationships with some of these bigger businesses, bigger companies. So you put
more money in building the product, you put more money in making sure your customers and restaurants are happy.
Yeah, we also did things that in hindsight I regret, because
tell me about
so for example, when we raised money, part of the business plan on the raise was that we need to expand outside of Kenya and we need to look at new markets. So we actually ventured into Uganda, we ventured into Rwanda. In the end, we actually made acquisitions, so we bought out the number one players. Luckily at that time they were relatively small and it wasn't a big sum of money. But what we realized that it was a mistake to look at those countries, because the markets were relatively small, and it was much better to concentrate on Nairobi because things were happening much faster over here and the opportunity was much bigger. But also Nairobi was a lot more cosmopolitan, urban, and so the adoption was going to be much faster here. So essentially going to a market which is relatively small with a harder sort of adoption rate. And we just had to do it because we had raised the money and we said that we were going to do it. But with hindsight, I lost, a lot of the money that we raised ended up going there. And a few years later, in Rwanda, we shut down the business.
Wow.
Because we simply said that if we wait 2 years, 5 years, nothing really is going to change. In fact, the market will be that much more ready. And unless a global player came in, and again, they would be thinking like us, why go into Rwanda when we haven't gone into some of these bigger cities all around the world? So we just realized that, sometimes you're doing things because there are strings tied to the purse, but, in hindsight, we should have never gone into Uganda, never gone into Rwanda. Now we're looking at, and in Uganda, we're actually doing really well. We acquired a company and we basically let them just take their own course, and we tried to first bring in the Eat Out brand, and then we realized that, we simply just need to wait, but we still own the company and the company is doing well, and it's also organically profitable. And when we feel that the time is right, we can decide to call it Eat Out or the other brands that we own. But for now, we felt that Nairobi was a more interesting opportunity for us.
Did you buy into that concept of scale? Like, why did you?
I think
because at that point everybody's startup was trying to raise money, and then the more money you raise, the more popular you are.
Yeah,
it's as if you're successful when you raise money.
Yeah,
did you buy into that? Did you feel like you did?
It's a really difficult question to answer, because to some extent, is it? And I'm just asking that question back to you, like. What is success? And right now I'm also sitting on that fence, whereby there is a relatively small, profitable yet fun and fulfilling business that we have. Sometimes I'm like, I couldn't have asked for more. Especially looking back at when I left the family business, I've built a name for myself. I've built a brand, and we actually have people who use our service or interact with our products. And generally, like, obviously there's room for improvement, but it's working. It's fine. And then on the other side, I look at the fact that there is not so much of what we're doing, and obviously good reasons, because we understood what happened in Uganda and Rwanda, but in many countries around the world, especially around Africa. And so we do have this opportunity, and we've also gone through the journey of figuring out and not making some of the mistakes that we made earlier, to go out and do this in other countries. For that to happen, we would need to raise more money, and
staggering amount.
Yeah, and there's a certain period where you are just spending money, and then hopefully that ends up becoming an opportunity to actually make the revenue and earn all of that back. And I think that at that time, it felt like a lot of money. And in hindsight, 10 years later or 8 years later, it was not a lot of money, and it was a big stake to give up. But, you can't sort of, with hindsight, obviously, you have the opportunity to sort of reflect and understand. But at that point, I didn't really have many other options, or at least I didn't know that I had many other options. And I've had a really good relationship with my investors, because, they gave me the money, they told me to put together these business plans, they gave me more money. And right now, because of that investment, I have this successful business that's generating income, employing 30 young professionals. So success there. But yes, I always sort of switch between, like, what should we do? Should we take this brand and follow the typical journey of scaling a business, or am I content and happy with what I have? And I think that for me, there were some personal sort of situations that made it even more, important to try to figure it out. I don't think I have figured it out, because, depending on what day of the week it is, I'll wake up and thinking that, today this is what we're going to do. We are going to go and speak to as many investors and try to paint this picture that we want to be in Africa. And other days I get up and I think that, I'm so happy with where we are. And I think that's generally a lot what entrepreneurs go through.
And that's part one of Mikul's story. In the second part, Mikul talks about the personal stories he mentioned, talks about what it's like when you have to reevaluate your life over your business, and he comes back to the story of fundraising, how it's like to be able to get the money you need and realize this may not be what you want to do, and turning your business around when things aren't working. Catch you next time.